Well, let's get into that story to do with La Bianca, their response, which they've put out, and of course, what the special prosecutor is proceeding with as far as the Customs Division is concerned. Joining us for that all-important conversation, Kweku Painto is a lawyer. He joins the conversation. We also have Frank Kofigan, Executive Secretary, Vehicle and Assets Dealers Union, joining the conversation. We'll try to see whether we can take a look at that statement as far as La Bianca is concerned. We'll get that, some of those details for you, and the letter to do with the auctioning of vehicles as well, as per the special prosecutor. We'll be getting details of those. But to start off the conversation, let me just say a very good morning to Frank. A very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining the conversation. Hello, Mr. Kofigan. Mr. Frank Kofigan, if you can hear me, a very good morning to you. Mr. Kofigan, you would have to unmute. Let me also say a very good morning to Lawyer Painto. Hello, Mr. Painto.
Yeah.
Is that Mr. Painto?
Hi, good morning.
Great. So Mr. Painto is online. Frank Kofigan is also on a line. If we have the statements, we'll put them up. If not, we'll just start the conversation from there. So I'll start with you, Mr. Painto. From the legal standpoint, we've had this back and forth between La Bianca Company Limited, which is saying the report of the Office of the Special Prosecutor is basically bogus, and that it's at variance with the reality of what happened. So let's start with the auctioning of vehicles first, as per what the special prosecutor has been putting out in recent times. We'll put up that statement for you to see. And so there it is on your screens. Customs Division of Ghana Revenue Authority. And the letter reads, the Office of the Special Prosecutor has commenced investigations into suspected corruption and corruption-related offenses in respect of auction sales of vehicles and other goods by the Customs Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority between the 1st of July 2016 and the 15th of August 2022. On 19th August 2022, the Special Prosecutor directed the Commissioner of the Customs Division to produce the following to the Office of the Special Prosecutor on or before the 30th of September 2022. 1, the particulars and clear description of all auctioned items. 2, the quantity of all auctioned items. 3, the prices at which the items were auctioned. 4, the date of each auction sales. And 5, the full names, addresses and telephone numbers of the successful bidders at all the auction sales. The Special Prosecutor further directed the Commissioner of the Customs Division to immediately halt and discontinue all auction sales till the investigations are concluded. It's signed by Kisi Ajabing, Special Prosecutor, and it's dated the 22nd of August 2022, which is Tuesday. So let's quickly get into that. Frank Kofigan, let me kickstart the conversation with you. The auctioning of vehicles and the practices that the Customs Division is known for. Are there any loopholes that you see? Are there any things that you see that are problematic when it comes to the auction of vehicles? Let's start the conversation from there.
Yeah, good morning to your viewers again. I think that auctioning of vehicles at the port over the years has been one of the main problems for dealers, or I would say importers in general. Now, you realize that the policy or the regulation that the customs use in this process, like we said earlier, has outlived its usefulness because it doesn't actually meet, or it doesn't actually add up to today's operations at the port and today's economic situations. And then we've asked on several occasions that that particular regulation be reviewed. Now, you realize that there is a regulation that states that if an importer brings in goods, you have up to about 90 days to clear them out of the port, failure to which the goods will be auctioned. Yes, I think those regulations were put to curb the backdoor channels that people use in getting their vehicles out, or using other means which actually are not the traditional means in getting the vehicle out. But be that as it may, the process itself of auctioning is, I would say, has become cancerous, because people have taken advantage of the system to sort of take properties and goods that belong to people. One of our dealers actually had a near-death situation at the port, which involved a vehicle of his. The vehicle came in, was 56 days at the port. He imported about 6 vehicles, was able to clear 4. He couldn't clear the last one. Failure to do that meant that when he went to the port after 56 days, the vehicle was nowhere to be found. They went to all the yards, all the parks at the port, from Bond to Golden Jubilee. The vehicle was nowhere to be found. So they went through the investigative department, headed then by Mr. Atta, and then they realized that the vehicle has been sold to somebody. We're not able to trace the vehicle. There were no documents actually to trace who the vehicle was sold to, who got the vehicle, and from where. So he had a contact at DVLA. They were able to put an AT&T on the chassis number, and then to our utter dismay, somebody went to the 37 DVLA office to register this vehicle. Then we realized who the vehicle was sold to, and then the price at which the vehicle was sold. It was a very sad situation, knowing that we have such loopholes, and then some custom officers have taken advantage of it, and then they are actually, I would say that's a form of misconduct at the port. But to say the least, you have to commend government for the introduction of ICOMS and the Unipass system, which has sought to cut down at a large extent some of these practices. Right. But the auction bid of the goods at the port till today is still cancerous.
Why is it so? You've elaborated on a number of matters. Recently, for example, we saw how some person reports that vehicles he was due to pay for, a particular vehicle was in excess of what? 200,000. He couldn't cough up, what was expected of him, but gave clear indication that he would be able to do so within a period of time, about 3 months. That was disallowed, yet the same vehicle was sold at a much lower price. In fact, a mind-boggling price, a little over 30,000 cedis. How, in effect, can this happen? Or is it just the cancerousness that you speak of, the corruption that could be at play?
It's the consciousness I'm talking about, because it looks like the human factor it's like a cartel. It's like a cartel there. So you are unable to get these, even if there are mediums to which you can pay in installment, or you can be given some rebate or whatever, depending on the sum of money you are paying, you cannot even assess it, because before you even say jack, somebody has already taken note of the vehicle, somebody has already pinned your vehicle and marked the vehicle down, and then it has to go. And like you said, for the right word, I'll say these vehicles are sold at peanuts. Okay, so government actually is losing a lot of revenue at the port. If the person was to pay 200,000 Ghana cedis for for the vehicle, and the person can do that in 3 months, why wouldn't there be an arrangement where the person can actually pay in installments, or the person can pay overtime? But before you even pay, even if there is an arrangement, before you are allowed to pay, you should know that the port charges, the rent charges that will accumulate before you pay, it's still better you even leave the vehicle to government to do whatever they want to do with it.
Let me come to Mr. Paintsall now. How curious is it that we see these developments rearing their ugly heads? I mean, to be realistic, it wouldn't be something that is new. But from what you have seen per the law, how problematic is it, and how much of how crucial is it that the OSP is focusing on this aspect of our customs dealings?
Thank you. I'll put it this way. A lot of the problems that we have in Ghana are self-inflicted. And they are self-inflicted because we have all chosen.
All right, so we have a bit of a hitch there with the connection to
The option sales. We call it P&D's Law 230, a clear law. In this country, it's called P&D's Law 230, is the auction sales law. The auction sales law prescribes the whole regime for the conduct of auction sales, and particularly because this is a law that was made by government for all of us, who would expect that the government itself would bring itself under the law as a government of laws. But then the whole idea, like I said, of an auction sale is to ensure that we got the best price for any item, best value or best selling price on the, for that particular item on the market. That is on the open market. It requires the appointment of an auctioneer. The law prescribes exactly what an auctioneer must do, failure of which the auctioneer himself can suffer the penalty of a conviction, including, for instance, clearly describing the particular item, the good, the particular item, the quantity. There are a regime for doing all of these things. So the real issue is, what extent are we, either as a government or as a people, willing to resort to the use of the law for the conduct of auction sales? My own view or my appreciation of the regime for selling things by SEPs is that they have made it more of a political act, instead of subjecting the whole of the exercise to the law. And that explains everything and all the problems that we are seeing. And unless we are willing to go back to the law and let the law guide the conduct. Indeed, if you read the law, it talks about the act. If you read the preamble, it's an act to provide for the proper conduct of auction sales. Proper conduct. And the law goes further down and prescribes, or rather shows, what amounts to proper conduct, the deviation from which then will amount to improper conduct. The simple issue is, are we willing to go by the law and what it says? Let me put it this way. Just by coincidence, about 20 or so years ago, I had the opportunity of bringing an action against the Ghana government in respect of this same auction sales law, because at all material time, the previous regime for licensing the auctioneers was by the Ghana Police Service. But when this law came into being, this law came into being, it provided for the setting up of what they call Auctioneers Registration Board, which among other functions was to license auctioneers to conduct the business. However, the law came into being for 13, how many years? Up to the time of President Kufuor. They had not even set up the board. And what it meant was that the distribution of goods and wherever for auction sales was done on, maybe should I say partisan or nepotism or whatever we call it, whichever. But the idea was that it was not transparent. So people, and this one, the issue arose because of the way customs at that time was conducting the auction sales. So when we took government to court, I'm talking about on behalf of clients, it's called Alaji Show Williams and a few. There were about 3. In fact, at the time that we went to court in 2000 something, there were in Ghana, only about 10 or so certified auctioneers. All the others did not have a license from the Auctioneer Registration Board. And those who even had a license was so because they had a license from the previous regime. when the law had not come to being. So believe me, we had to go to court, got a judgment before the law could be amended to provide for, registration of those who my clients call quack auctioneers. The law had to be amended. And that is how, unfortunately, the way we have handled the auction sales law, we still have many problems with the auction sales law. And what it means, the problem about the auction sales law is that everybody has refused, failed, or neglected to respect the law. And that is what we are seeing. That's what's going on. So I'm not surprised at all that the Office of Special Prosecutor has decided to cast its lens in that direction. And if he did it, I wouldn't know. I don't want to predict. But I believe that there are a lot of things that will come out that we will think horrifying. But if they come out as horrifying, we will not pretend that we didn't know. In law, we say a man desires the natural consequences of his own conduct. You cannot pretend to ignore the law and expect that things will be done in accordance with the law. That's my prominent remarks that I want to make.
Let me bring in Vitus Azim, anti-graft campaigner. And you have heard Mr. Painter talk about a blatant refusal of people to do the right thing. He talks about how egregious these activities are, how inimical they are to the fortunes of the state. Now we have Mr. Kisia Jabeng going after such issues, dating all the way back to 2016, getting into 2017, all the way till now. Will this yield? Will this, first of all, reveal the sort of rot Mr. Painsil speak of? And what benefits could this investigation yield? Hello, Mr. Azim?
Yes, depending on how transparent the investigations will go on. If he makes the investigations and makes his findings public and his recommendations public, one, it will be a bit difficult for him to actually enforce his recommendations or whatever directives he gives. Because from our perspective, the auctioning at the harbors, ports and harbors, is political. People can just go to the presidency, collect coupons, and go and pick a car of their choice and pay peanuts. So it may not yield the desired results. But at least if he publishes it, then we'll at least know that somebody driving a V8 was not actually entitled to that V8, and that he stole the V8 that was imported by somebody else from his hard-earned efforts. So I think that is the main thing. But if he actually has the commitment of the president, then he should be able to retrieve vehicles that have been wrongfully purchased or allocated, or make them pay monies that they should have paid. For example, if you import a car and the duty is supposed to be like 40,000, but you couldn't pay a seat, there's no reason why you should sell a car for less than 40,000. At least it should be sold for 40,000. Then it will expose the systematic issues that allow these things to take place at the ports and harbors. In fact, it's not only at the ports and harbors. Institutions auction vehicles for peanuts. Sometimes a head can bring in a car, and because he or she is entitled to two cars, he parks the other one, jacks it on rocks, and after 5 years or 4 years, you auction it yourself. These are things that maybe after dealing with the auctioning at the ports and harbors, the special prosecutor also needs to go into who buys what cars from institutions, what is their state, and at how much. It will help in addressing our current situation where government properties are just taken up by individuals for their personal benefit. That's what I can say about this whole.
Let me ask you then, so for you, this is a political problem. It's systemic. And that would also mean that it is long-term, not just restricted to this administration, right?
Oh, yes. It started, at least as far as I know, during even the military regime, PNDC time, people were going to the harbors and taking cars. It's not new. It has been happening under all governments, at least from the time of the revolution.
That begs the question then. If he's going, Kisia Jabeng, yes, there are records, but if he's going as far back as 2016, where you may have had different people at post, where you may have had even different people in government and all of that, how practical is his approach to go that far back? And is it going to yield any results? Wouldn't it mean that, the battle has been lost right from the start?
Well, that's what I suspect. That's what I've just tried to say. I don't expect him to make much success. Because
you don't expect him to make much success?
Senior party people and other people have benefited from these things. People who have nothing, they are not in public service. And some of them have taken these vehicles and turned them into for commercial vehicles. And so it is a difficult battle that he has decided to fight. And we can only pray and hope that he succeeds. But I doubt very much if it will get the desired results.
It is interesting that we have this dynamic. And let me come back to Frank Kofiga, because as far back as 2011, we know that former President John Evans Atta Mills, may his soul rest in peace, went to the Tema port and took on SEPs after that Anas expose. And he did not mince words. In fact, he was pretty scathing in his remarks. Do you agree with Vitus Azim that this is a long-standing problem and that really we've not done much to stem its tide, even with all the electronic devices, electronic systems we've put in place?
Yeah, I think so. This is not a problem that started yesterday or started in 2017. It would be very unfair to this government if we attribute all the problems at the port to this government alone. But yes, like you said, most of these is politically, it has a political connotation to it, because when you're at the port, if you're an agent or you're an importer working there, you realize that people are walking around with cheats, proudly saying where they came from, and who gave them the cheat and the vehicle. They choose the vehicle at will. Okay, so I think the special prosecutor might not be able to achieve fully what they probably intend in the reliefs that we saw in the request, but to a larger extent, there might be it will bring out some form of cleanup. It will bring some sanity into the system. People will get to understand the processes well. And if, like my brother said, Mr. Kwachi said, there is kind of a review in the auctioneering system to meet today's standard, digitalized system, where everybody in their room can access and check, I think it will both rake revenue for the government, and then importers will not be shortchanged in their goods. That is, if there is also a room for some form of negotiation of payments if one default or one is not able to pay on time. So the OSP, yes, if the OSP will succeed, it means that all agencies, all departments, and then services thereof will have to aid them, will have to help them. The media will have to support them, because this has been an age-long canker that has eaten into the core of the ports and harbors.
Let me bring in Kobina Atta-Bedu. He's a procurement analyst. Kobina, very good morning to you, sir. Hello, Kobina. If you can hear me, a very good morning to you. Please unmute.
Very good morning to you too. Good morning.
Great. It's a pleasure having you. We've started the conversation off on the tangent of the customs division and auctioning of vehicles, benchmark values, and all of that, some of their rulings in respect of these. But especially when it comes to the auctioning of vehicles, we've realized that there are lots of problems that have been made mention of here in terms of how even the politicization of the process, where some people in government can have access to these vehicles and they buy them dirt cheap. And so by so doing, starve the economy of taxes or revenue that we could have got. But from the procurement angle, what are some of the flaws in the system that you see?
Okay, thank you very much for having me, and it's a pleasure to share my professional opinion. Now, the Constitution is very clear on the objectives of the actions we take, that at all times it should be in the central interests of the state, and anything to the contrary amounts to a conflict of interest, which must be investigated by the Shraj, and measures be taken to forestall that. So I think all this discussion should not be a discussion that ends on the air. A petition must go if it means Joy FM making a request to the Commissioner for Human Rights so that it will be investigated. But I don't think it should be left to. Please give me a minute. Let me clean my camera. Yeah, it's.
All right. So that is Kobina Atta Bedu. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yes. Now, Act 663, which is the legal framework for the management of procurement, public procurement in this country, also deals with disposal of assets in Part 8 and Article 83 specifically. And I will read. 83.1 says that the head of a procurement entity shall convene a board of survey comprising representatives of departments with vehicles, unserviceable, obsolete, or stored items, plant and equipment, which shall report on the items and, subject to a technical report on them, recommend the best method of disposal after the officer in charge has completed a board of survey form. The board of survey's recommendation shall be approved by the head of the procurement entity, and the items shall be disposed as approved. Where items become unserviceable for reasons other than fair wear and tear, such as through an accident or expiry, a set procedure established by the board for handling losses shall be followed before the items are boarded and disposed. If we are to take this as the legal framework and we are to conduct an audit, not a forensic audit, a financial audit, all we have to do is to go by Article 83.1 and ask them to give us documentary evidence of having followed these processes. Now, I am a procurement specialist of long standing, 20 years plus experience. I have handled asset disposals across board. In one of the organizations that I used to work in, I built a platform where all the vehicles that we were disposing were posted on the auction platform with their relevant information. And the tender was open to staff, and they all placed their bid.
But that is against the law.
No, I was working in the private sector, not in the public sector. So I don't operate with this act. But the governance system that I had established with the management of the business was a fair and open and transparent bidding process where all staff could bid, and the highest bidder is awarded the vehicle. The objective is to maximize the value you get from that asset. Because an asset has a book value. And in the case of vehicles, according to IFRS standards, International Financial Reporting Standards, it is supposed to be depreciated over a period of between 3 years and 5 years. So you can depreciate it not less than 3 years, but up to 5 years. If you depreciate it up to 5 years, it means every year, 20% of its value is lost. So by 5 years, a car is fully depreciated on the books. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't have value. It has what is called residual value. So when you are auctioning or you are disposing of such a vehicle, your primary objective is to receive the residual value. Now, how do you set the residual value? Normally, you take it to a surveyor, and we have the Ghana Institute of Surveyors, and we have people who have specialized in transport survey. STC is one organization that is able to provide those services, and I have used their services in the past. STC would assess the value, the vehicle, and place a value on it that this is the residual value or the market value. That means that is the reserve price. You won't accept a bid lower than that.
Right.
Anybody who bids above that has given you value for money, and you can give it to the person. Now, the question is that, is this what happened? Now, if the residual value of that asset sitting at the port is the valuation customs placed on the vehicle that the importer should pay, and the importer was not able to pay it, and because of that, the asset has to be disposed of, there is no logical reason why it should be sold at a price lower than what the valuation was. If that was the case and it was possible to do that, then they should have discounted the valuation and allowed the importer to pay the same lower price and take his vehicle away.
Right.
As soon as you change that, then we go into a conflict of interest situation. The state has been shortchanged. It is causing financial loss to the state, and the perpetrator should be brought to book.
And this is precisely the scenario that has led to this conversation that we're having, because in some instances we are told that people who were struggling to pay their duty but had promised to pay were made to step aside while the vehicles in question were sold for far less. And that is the question that arises when you talk about the residual vehicle, the residual prices or values of these vehicles, because even if it has depreciated over 5 years, it still has value. And so for you, would you say then that it is apt for the OSP to be pursuing this? And do you feel that this investigation will amount to much? Because mind you, my other guests have spoken about the politicization of the process and how sometimes people are, they can even handpick, I want this kind of vehicle, and then there'll be compliance, and they get these vehicles dirt cheap. Will this amount to anything?
The only reason why this act here has been flouted with all the disdain that people can muster, the only reason why that is continuing is because we have never had the will to prosecute anybody, even though there are provisions in the law that allows for prosecution. I can give you one example where a ministry spent more than $30 million without going to PPA, blew it and went back to get what is called a ratification. Now, a ratification is an activity that happens as part of a process. It follows an investigation of a breach. And a ratification is a solution to avoiding liability because a legal commitment has been made. And if you decide to get out of the commitment, you might face judgment debt. So ratification allows you to avoid that one. But it means whoever perpetrated must be brought to book. We are using ratification, but we are not bringing people to book. So people will continue to do this with impunity. And I am happy that OSP has picked it up. I want the OSP to take it to the logical conclusion. He has prosecutorial powers. I will be very happy to see that he can prosecute people on, is it section 92 or 91 of the Act, where it allows for, yes, 92, offenses relating to procurement. I want to see some people prosecuted and convicted on the basis of 92. For this, people to begin to respect 663 and work with 663 the way they should work with.
Let me come now to Vitus Azim before I go back to Lawyer Painter. We're talking about a situation that, fleeces the state of tax revenue it could have got for the development of our country, which is diverted to different, pockets. But I recall in 2011, when former President Atta Mills, bless his soul, was still alive, after that Anas investigation, he spoke of the fact that those in the customs division should have assets declaration when they enter, and that periodically this should happen to check their sources of income, to check what property they have and how they have come by this property. As I sit here, the information reaching me is that this is not happening. You could correct me. But if it is not, does that not mean that we together as a system have just turned a blind eye to this loophole? Hello, Vitus Azim. Hello, Mr. Azim. If you can hear me, that question was for you. All right. It appears we've lost Mr. Azim on that point. I'll put that same point to Mr. Painso and later to Mr. Azim.
And you see, talking about our problems, sometimes I really do not know where we have to start from. But we've made all the right points. The issue is, where do we go from here? On a personal level, I believe that what the OSP is doing is in the right direction. The real issue is, where do we go from here? In other words, we have the laws to deal with almost all the situations in Ghana, but somehow, after we've made the laws, we all make a deliberate attempt to ignore the laws, and then we find ourselves in the kind of self-inflicted problems and issues.
We seem to have lost him.
Hello, Mr. Painso. So we've lost, the connection went bad. We've lost your thoughts. So you can go back by about some 30 seconds and share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that the OSP is, what it's doing is in the right direction. At least it will establish the canker, the rot that we have in the system. It would identify or expose those who have benefited from the current system. That would be a form of naming and shaming. Number three, it can assist the OSP, where possible, to get people to pay the actual prices or as near as possible for the items that they took wrongfully or on the dubious circumstances. But more importantly, it will provide for presently. I mean, the whole idea of law is that it changes to suit the changing circumstances of the times. In other words, laws are not static. As society changes, then we try to see whether the laws that we have in place, they are appropriate or require amendment, because the way the world is moving, we are moving at a very fast pace in this digital era and so forth and so on. And there are things that are currently in place that were not in place at the time that a lot of these laws were made. And therefore, I heard one of the panelists speak of digitalization, which is the modern thing, possibly things that have to be introduced as part of the law. But having said all that, the spirit of the law remains, which is that the things that belong to the state, for instance, this regime where somebody, the way the state operates now is like the state deliberately have made a kind of laws that will make people lose their properties to the state in circumstances where they cannot help it. And the whole idea is that as soon as it comes into the hands of the state, then political actors and public officers would then take advantage of other people's plight. All these people are Ghanaians. We are all Ghanaians. And therefore, like the other panelists have said, if we need to make new regulations, and this thing will be done by law, and this will not be left back to individual whims and caprices and so forth and so on, so that the current law that we have that obliges the state to confiscate the items, properties, cars of people, importers who cannot meet deadlines and so forth and so on, could possibly now be revised or amended to make it flexible. And the idea is to ensure that the state will still get what it has to get, but possibly not within the same short time. Maybe some of these things may be reviewed downwards and so forth and so on. But all of these things have to be done by laws. As the situation exists, I'm not aware of a regime of any set of laws that empowers any of our officers or any of our people who regulate these things to be able to behave that way. And of course, once it comes into the custody of the state, This is an immemorial. This is a problem that has always been there. One of the panelists talk of the will to deal with the situation. The will, the political will. And I want to congratulate the OSP because, let me put it this way. If you look at the problem that we have in Ghana, then you can throw your hands in despair. Because the idea is that where do we start and where do we end? But let's thank God that at least He has started somewhere. We are all watchers. We are all citizens. We can all become citizen vigilantes. We can all monitor what is going on. Because I can assure you that if you go to any of our public libraries, there are HORDs, and HORDs is HORDES. I'm talking about piles and piles of investigative reports, recommendations, and actions to be taken which were never done, and therefore we always seem to go back to the same position that we were before all these things started. So now, at least we have this situation. I believe that we are all partakers. In other words, we are all going to see what's going to end. Whether MPP is in power the next 2 or 3 years or whether it's not in power, it is something that all the political parties, all the people who have ruled this country have done systematically. I'm talking to you about a case that we went to court 20 or so years ago, and these were part of the issues that we went to court for, in the hope that once the court dealt with the matters, it will address the main issue, which was the corruption, which was the favoritism, the nepotism, all of them, they are one. And therefore, the problem persists. And possibly what is being done by the OSP may provide a good platform for all of us to see how we move forward from here.
Okay, and let me just bring this, run this by you before I bring in Vitus Azim. Since you're talking about the law, in 2011, again, former President Mills bemoaned the fact that there was an ANAS expose as well on the cocoa industry and smuggling to the Ivory Coast and all of that, with SEPS, some 14 SEPS officials involved. He bemoaned the fact that the prosecutors were not doing the right thing, and the courts were also letting go of these people. So they were basically getting to enjoy their loot. How much of a problem is the legal system we have as well? How much of a problem is it in dealing with such situations? Briefly on that, Mr. Painter.
The problem that we have with the legal system, listen to me very carefully. I'm sorry, last 2 or 3 days, I was part of a discussion in which the Yoko boss was bemoaning the problem with prosecution. Let me tell you what. My view of corruption and the way to do corruption is like you bring in a cat to a house full of mice. The cat for the first day becomes very excited and eat as many as he can catch. By the third day, he's fed up. He can just sit and look at the mice pass in front of his face, and that's the way it goes. That is the corruption in this country. It's so much and it's so overwhelming. Unfortunately, we don't have the technical people. Let me tell you what, prosecuting corruption is not an easy thing. It is not an easy, it requires experts. Unfortunately, in all the sectors that these things occur, accounting, quality, and so forth and so on, the experts are outside government. They are outside. The few that remain in the system, go to accountant generals, go even Ghana Revenue Agency itself. I mean, they cannot deal with the volume of things that really come. The Ghana police, they are not properly equipped. All of them, and even the Office of Special Prosecutor. Come on, look at one man. His whole secretariat, I don't believe that he's got a set even of 40 people who are technical, who can look into the books, who can appreciate some of these things. So look at one man, look at all the things that he's prosecuted. The truth of the matter is that he can only do so much at any one point in time. But that cannot be a reason why these things must not go on. I mean, look at even the collapse of these banks. Look at all the people who have used, their customers and whatever's money, acquire properties outside Ghana, and they are still walking about and doing all kind of things. So, and Yoko, go to Yoko. Look at the number of people, investigators who are there.
Right.
So that's part of the problem. And it is, that's if you look at the legal system, the judge sits in court. He expects you to bring the clear evidence before him. The experts who are supposed to do the analysis and come to the conclusions, half of the time, they're overwhelmed. That is my own view. And I'm sorry that that's my appreciation of how government is overwhelmed. And that is why it encourages everybody to join the fray. That is what is happening.
I will request your brief thoughts.
Can I contribute to this?
Who is this, please? Is this Kobina?
This is Kobina. This is Kobina.
Right,
yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the first point I want to make to Mr. Pinter, and he's a lawyer, and he knows that, listen, our legal books, they are replete with very solid laws. I dare say that in Africa, most of the countries come to pick our laws and adapt it to suit theirs. So we have the laws. Some of them are obsolete and will need to be updated to suit modern times. But we have the right legal framework. The problem is we do not want to use it because those who are supposed to actually drive the process are the beneficiaries of all these things that go on.
Yeah.
So if you go to Parliament today and Parliament has to act because it will affect them, they will not do it. If you go to the ministries, the minister has the power. The Minister of Finance has a lot of powers. But he will not do it because it will not suit his party. When government and public goods becomes the largesse for political patronage and reward, this is what we experience, and that is what is eating us up. So the only way we can do this, listen, you think it is deliberate for the OSP to be suffering. He has not been allowed the resources that would allow him to run like in free range because they need to restrain him. If they give him all the resources...
Hold it, Kobina Atabedu. You're saying that it is intentional not to give the OSP the logistical, the human resource, because if they do that, then he will be able to deal with all the problems and the system itself will suffer.
You see, if you take something like banking, if you want the best banking brains, you shouldn't find them in the commercial banks. You should find them in the central bank. That is how they will be able to regulate the commercial banks because they can't beat them with anything. In the same way, if you go to the OSP should be able to hire the best brains. Because if I am sitting there and you come and I'm investigating you and come and give me a cock and bull story, I'll look in your face and I'll tell you that, go and tell that to the Marines. Because it's a cock and bull story. Because that is not what happens. So you won't even dare. But if they don't resource him well, and he has to accept to work with people who do not have what it takes, then they will not be. So sometimes when he talks about the fact that lawyers go to court and they don't go with a solid case with the right evidence, sometimes it is deliberate to botch the case. They should be seen to be doing something about it. So they will be forced by public opinion and pressure to go to court. And then they'll go and botch the case on a technical ground and they will lose it. The other thing is that power of the Attorney General to go and ask for a nolli prosequi. That nolli prosequi allows him the discretion to go and say that, you know what, I don't want to pursue this again. Why is it that up to date we haven't been able to retrieve the monies from Wyoming? These are the things that tells you that there's a deliberate hand behind all these things in order not to prosecute people. Thank you.
Interesting twist you brought in there, Kobina Atabedu. Let me come to Vitus Azim. So before we get into the La Bianca issue, proffering solutions for the auction of vehicles and the benchmark values, the rulings on same, I also want to sneak in the bit about SEPS officials. Acta Mills, bless his soul, said they should have declaration of assets when they're coming in, and that it should periodically happen even while they are still in service to check what they have, their sources of income, what they are earning, and what property they have to find out whether there is some commensurability. That has not happened. So we ask ourselves then, are we serious in fighting corruption at SEPS and in other state agencies? You can address that and then add your quick submissions in terms of the solutions, the way forward. I'll pick that from each of you and then we'll get into the La Bianca issue.
The thing is that we have not succeeded in getting the assets declaration thing done. because even our parliamentarians don't support it. They are supposed to have oversight over the executive. But because they are also included in this thing, they don't allow it to happen. As far back as 2008, we met them, the relevant committees in Hope to look at the regulations to the asset declaration law. We have three main issues. Close relatives like wife and children under age 18. They said, no way, they are not public servants, they will not allow it to happen. Publication. They said, no, if you publish the armed robbers and others who will attack you. Then verification. They said it's not illegal, it's not in the law. So they shut down the basic things that will make the asset declaration regime effective as an anti-corruption tool. So they have put it aside. So even the Auditor General does not open it to see what is in there. You just send a blank sheet of paper, put it in an envelope and seal it, and the Auditor General issues you the receipt, saying, "Oh, you have declared your asset." And that is not what an asset declaration thing should be. No.
Are you saying then that our assets declaration regime has failed, that basically it is useless? Is that what you're saying?
It has woefully failed. Because nobody works, even acts on the declarations, those who agree to. You see, if you have an asset declaration regime and people declare their assets, somebody should first find out who has not declared. And even with those who have declared, somebody should be able to look at, is it true that you say you have 3 houses or you just have 1 house? And you cannot do that if you don't publish it. And this is the case, they say they cannot publish it. And I have said that I dare the Auditor General to at least publish a list of names of people who have not declared. Or even if he or she is afraid to publish a list of those who have not declared, he should at least publish names of those who have declared. So that Ghanaians themselves will now look at that list and say, oh, if my MP has not declared, and question the person. But no Auditor General so far has been bold enough to do that.
In recent times, we saw a list of that nature.
No, even up to now, we don't have regulations for that law because of those disagreements between parliamentarians and the Auditor General.
I was hinting, Vitus, that in recent times we saw a bit of a list on the back of a publication, I believe, by the Fourth Estate, alleging that some members of parliament, among others, in the executive, had not declared their assets. Maybe that's a first step, something that the special prosecutor could lean on. But quick solutions, gentlemen, not too much time on this. Quick solutions. In bullet points, if you like, what would be the way forward in this particular regard? I'll stick with you, Vitus, to start.
I think, one, we need regulations to the Act. And the regulations should address the 3 issues I've mentioned, including your spouse and children under age. That's number 1. Number 2, publication of the declarations. And number 3, verification of the declaration. You say you have a house in Kumasi. Sometimes you follow up to find out whether you really have a house in Kumasi or not. Those are the things that make an asset declaration regime an effective anti-corruption tool.
Thank you. Just hold for me. Frank, what would be your quick submissions?
It looks like I have to go.
You have to go, Vitus? Is that Vitus? Mr. Azim, if you can hear me, if you could just stay with me for a few minutes, just get quick submissions on the solutions, then I'll take your initial thoughts on the Bianca issue, and then you could go, please. Is that possible?
Okay.
All right. So quick submissions. Frank Kofiga, for you, the solution, as far as this car auction is concerned, 30 seconds to each of you, so I can go back to Vitus Azim.
The check system or the allocation of these goods at the port to party people should stop. It should be seized with immediate effect. Also, I think there should be some form of digitalization or reforms in the the auctioneering system we have in Ghana, and also any single publication in terms of auctioning at the port should have some sort of media coverage, or the media should be involved, so that there's be some form of clarity in it. And I think that customs should have a payment system where importers of goods and services can pay in installment if truly there is a reason of non-availability of funds.
All right, Frank, thank you so much for having joined this conversation, and
Thank you so much
we're
for
grateful
having me.
that you joined. Let me bring in Lawyer Painter. So very quickly, very quickly, what is the way forward for you on this matter?
I mean, the way forward for me, since this whole show is about the auction arrangement, is that when this report is out, we'll be looking out for the extent to which the law itself was complied with. And if not, to what extent are we willing, ready, or able to implement the auction sales law? Because there's already a law in place. It's how compliant we all are or must be. That is the issue. And if there are any reasons why we should not comply with what is already the law, we must know. It's as simple as that.
Kobina, for you, the way forward?
The current practice of all these asset disposals going to the Chief of Staff's office for approvals and all that is a complete aberration of the law. The position of the law is that it is the head of that procurement entity who makes that decisions after a board of survey has been instituted. So every procurement entity is supposed to have its board of survey that would always periodically, so if it's every 3 months or every 6 months or every year, put all assets that are up for disposal together, conduct their survey, send a report to the head of entity with a mechanism for disposal. He gives the approval and they dispose it. Now, when it comes to the mechanisms for disposal, like we said, in the past, you could, it was manual. Today, we have digitalization. It should be digitalized so that it will be devoid of manipulation, because in the current regime, I can assure you, I've been to auctions before, where you can see that the auctioning had been pre-programmed. So as soon as somebody raises a bid, the auctioneer drops the hammer and then nobody can bid again. And so you can see manipulation and machinations behind the scenes. All these things should be done to ensure that the system cannot be manipulated and the state is getting the full benefits.
Kobina, thank you. Stay with us on this bit as well. So let me bring in Vitus Azim. Vitus, we're getting into the Bianca issue, and the authorities are talking about the fact that the special prosecutor got it completely wrong. They say the report is at variance with the reality, and they are saddened to learn of the recent publication of that report by the Office of the Special Prosecutors and the following discussions in the media. And they are denying categorically that the company and its CEO, Mrs. Asomahene, procured customs advance ruling through influence peddling or trading of influence. I'd like your quick take on that, because some have been quick to say that on the back of the CEO going to see the special prosecutor with a lawyer, whether 6 lawyers as some have said, or 1 lawyer as they have intimated, with the presence of a lawyer and coughing up or agreeing to pay the over 1 million, 1.074 million, meant that tacitly she had admitted being at fault. What is your take on that?
I have said that even from the very beginning that we need further investigation to prove whether there was influence peddling or not. And I asked the pertinent questions, some of the pertinent questions like, who approached the customs officer, the ruling, and the discount in or the reduction in the valuation of the imports? Did the person introduce himself or herself as a Council of State member and a member of the Board of Directors of Ports and Harbors Authority, or coming on behalf of that person and using that to ask for the favor in order to establish whether there was influence peddling or not? So we need further investigations into this. But as to the denial, my question is, did the company pay the money after the Special Prosecutor's directive or before? If they paid after the Special Prosecutor's directive, why did they pay it to the Office of Special Prosecutor and not the GRA? If they voluntarily went to pay tax that they thought they were owing, the appropriate place for them to have paid would have been to the GRA. and not to the Office of Special Prosecutor. So I don't think that they can run away from the fact that the payment of the money was in response to the Special Prosecutor's directive. But again, as the Special Prosecutor has said, and some of us have agreed, there's a need for further investigation into this matter. Yes, only recover the money, but is that the end of it? Who helped her? Who helped the money to go? Should that person just go free? What action are you going to take on anybody, other person that was involved? So
are you referring to the customs? Are you referring to the customs officials in question, Colonel Damwenko? Are you referring to them? Hello, Vitus.
Yeah, hello.
Are you referring to the customs officials like Colonel Damwa?
I am just saying that whoever was involved in the whole process, I'm not referring to a particular individual. All along the route, who was involved?
Mr. Azim, thank you so much for staying with us. Thank you so much for your time. He's an anti-graft crusader, anti-graft campaigner, and he joined the conversation. Let me stick with the rest of my guests on that self-same matter. Now, Lawyer Paintel, you would realize that La Bianca Company, through its CEO and other leaders, have come out to say that they have been tax compliant over the years and that they have applied for customs advance rulings over time. This does not necessarily mean that they were peddling influence. It is also cited that the Ghana Revenue Authorities Act 819 conducts periodic post-clearance audits to determine possible undervaluation or overpayment of taxes, and that in effect they did not breach any laws, even in respect of agreeing to pay the over 1 million Ghana cedis retrospectively. So when you look at this entire matter, like I posed to Vitus Azim, some say by merely accepting to pay, you admit that you were at fault. Is that the position of the law as you see it? Do we have Mr. Paintel with us?
All right. I think we lost him. He's not showing. So I can pick it up.
It appears we've lost him. Kobina, so let's hear from you. What's your take?
Yes. So I feel sorry for La Bianca. Now, why do I say that? The customs regime gives customs officers a lot of discretion. And the position of the law is that if you evade a tax, they can surcharge you a penalty of between 100% and 300%.
Of the value of what you were supposed to pay.
Of the value of what you were supposed to pay. So if you're supposed to pay 100 cedis and you evade, they can ask you to pay the 100 cedis, but pay 300% as penalty. So where you have between 100 and 300%, what will be the basis to take 300 or to take 100% as penalty? That is where a lot of negotiation happens. Again, the regime exists that, listen, if you are a large importer and you are a large taxpayer, you have leverage to sometimes negotiate. Now, tax evasion is criminal. Tax avoidance is not criminal.
Right.
And it is important that every organization and its finance unit would put in place systems that would ensure that they are tax compliant, but they can mitigate their losses through taxes. So tax avoidance is okay. So if La Bianca looks at its import and its tax base, the contribution, and they think that we can go and negotiate based on volumes. I can give you an example in my past, and still it was in the private sector. I belong to a multinational company that imports a particular commodity as part of its commercial activities. We have a global agreement, and we leverage on that scale to negotiate prices that will be next to impossible for anybody to get because of the global scale. Now, customs at the time has in its valuation systems a price for that type of commodity, which was significantly higher than the price I was getting. So at one point, when they did my valuation certificates and they said I should pay taxes based on X value to this tune, I protested. When we haggled and it got to a point, I took in a permission to clear on permit. And I litigated it for almost a year And I proved it with documentation and evidence of a global tender being had done to get those prices. And that is the fair price. And it will be unjust and unfair for the state to hike my price up just because they want to take money. That is also criminal. But it will be the state perpetuating it against its citizens. So eventually, the inspection house had to reverse the valuation and use my rates. You can only stand your ground like that if you are an organization of integrity and your documentations are perfect or next to perfect. And for the period that I was responsible for logistics and for driving all those processes, my documentation was apt. Now, the question is, if we go into La Bianca with an audit, can we find all of that?
And that was exactly where I was about to go to with you, because then when you look at them, we know that they bring in over 200 containers or so every month. And you look at the volumes that you speak of. If they were found to be tax compliant and all of that, would you then say that this has been, I don't know whether to categorize this as a witch hunt, but unfair, like you put it?
Exactly. So that's why I'm saying that if they are apt and they used a legal means by going to negotiate with customs, and customs has their discretion and they granted them, then they should have stood their ground. And if it means going to court to argue their case out, they can go to court and litigate. But as soon as OSP calls you and you go and you offer to make good, it suggests that you want to kill the case. You don't want them to dig further. And immediately, anybody with a criminology mindset or an intelligence mindset is, why is it that you quickly came to close this case by paying up? Is there something else I should probe? And the natural response of the OSP is, what else is there?
Be desired, then it creates questions. It raises eyebrows. You consent to that. The quick move to go and make this payment, that raises eyebrows.
Yes, it's like you said, it suggests a tacit acceptance of liability here. And so there's no point to drag it. Let us kill the matter. I've paid. The matter should normally die.
Let me bring in Lawyer Paintel. Thank you for Kobna for holding the fort. Let me bring in Lawyer Paintel now. Do you agree with Kobna Atabedu on that point? That, listen, two quick points to digest. First of all, if you're bringing in the large volumes that La Bianca does, and of course, if you're paying your taxes, giving revenue to the state, of course, some concessions will be made to you from time to time, depending on your negotiations with the customs division. But then again, do you qualify? Have you met your tax obligations, first of all? And did you not peddle influence in the entire process? So different dynamics to the question. And La Bianca is saying that they did nothing wrong. But on the other hand, we also see that La Bianca went ahead very quickly to accept making this over 1 million Ghana cedi payment. The question is, why? Does that raise eyebrows, your eyebrows?
Not necessarily. You see, in law, as a matter of law, there is such thing as without prejudice. Without prejudice. Somebody makes a case against you. In law, you did not necessarily accept the person's claim. But sometimes you just don't really have the time to go into all the hassle. And for that reason and that reason only, you offer to the person what the person says you owe or you are liable for. And that should end the case. You are not entitled to litigate every matter. And even there are payments that we call nuisance value. There are what you call liabilities that of nuisance value. Let me just give you, sometimes I like to give analogous reasoning or analogous examples. In Accra, everywhere you want to start building, whatever title you have, there are people who are going to come up who claim the land is theirs. They are land guards. You don't really have the time. The project that you want to do is Kanban and stuff like that, and somebody comes to stake a rival claim and this. You have to sit down and calculate. If you have to go to court, it's going to take you how many years? So a lot of times, I've been involved in some transactions like that. Sit down with the person and decide that you want to give some person, pay the person off. And that is a nuisance value. You pay not because you are the mate of the person's claim, but you want your piece of to continue. please, anytime somebody makes an admission to make a payment is necessary, guilty, or liable, with due respect, it cannot be so in a legal situation. It's without prejudice. You pay it and without prejudice. And then you settle the claim, you get your peace of mind. Any smart business person ought to be doing that. As simple as that. Because, I mean, with due respect, our economics in Ghana is not the kind of situations where, I mean, like elsewhere, big-time corps would go to court and litigate over a penny, over 2 pennies, 3 pennies, and stuff like that on matters of principle. Because the whole idea is that if they don't fight that 1 penny claim or that 2 penny claim, then they'll be opening a floodgate to all manner of claims. And that's what makes some people fight on matters of principle, however small the amount is. But when you make a calculation of a certain value or liability and you think that, listen, I want my peace of mind. Why should I allow these people to come and open up my books and waste my time and all of that? And for that reason, you want to write off a check or you want to write out a check. That ends the matter. So on that issue, I disagree with him. It may as well be the case that they are liable for other things. But please, I mean, as a principle, I have told you what operates in the real world of business.
Is this then unfair, like Kobana was suggesting, that it could end up being unfair to, especially someone who is paying that much into the state's kitty? Would you say then that it is unfair? We've heard, for example, from the former special prosecutor, Martin Amidou, who says this has no basis, it has no substance to it. But others have said, no, we must investigate these and get down to the merits of the case, which is why they're saying they support the special prosecutor. Is he being unfair?
No, we don't know why the unfairness arises. I mean, I don't know whether even I've understood your question. Unfair on whose part? Are you suggesting that
the special prosecutor's part? Because it is something that is not, it is not an exception as the picture has been painted.
No, as for the prosecutor, he has to make a determination. And the prosecutor really needs not run around the courts if you can accept his findings or you can accept his claim and you settle it. Notwithstanding that, if a criminal offense has been committed, he may still wish to go ahead and do the prosecution. But please, let's look at the realities. I mean, of course, now we've got a new legislation that allows for plea bargaining and stuff like that. I don't really believe that that law was put in place. But don't forget that the prosecutor has got a choice in law whether to prosecute or not to prosecute. That's one of the things people don't understand. When a prosecutor decides he doesn't want to prosecute, it becomes a political decision, even though it has a legal basis. But if the prosecutor, for any reason, decides not to prosecute, nobody can take the prosecutor to court for not prosecuting any particular matter. If 10 people commit an offense and he decides to prosecute 9 of them and leave out 1 of them, which sometimes is done in other places where 1 person will be used to prosecute, I mean, as prosecution witness and stuff like that. So it's a whole regime. It's not a cut and paste. It's not a fixed kind of thing. So it's a discretion that the prosecutor has to exercise. And once he has exercised that, even if you call it political, I mean, the other party has accepted it and he decides to drop the matter. In my honest view, that should end the matter. What's the point about going to court for how many years just to prove or demonstrate? Don't forget that even when somebody is convicted by the court, people forget that the person is then punished. It could be a fine, it could be an imprisonment, it could be both. But a fine is at the discretion of the court unless it's expressly provided for by statute. And the judge is not bound to impose any particular punishment, unless, of course, as provided by law. But it could be so low that elsewhere, people value the cost of the prosecution itself. I mean, Ghana, we don't do that kind of thing. You have to sit down and think of the resources that you need to marshal. Elsewhere, it is calculated, it is determined that may cost $1 million to prosecute this case. The point is, must the state put $1 million down to prosecute a case at the end of which we are going to get 100,000 cedis? And for what purpose? This is what makes prosecution a purely political decision. The politics is founded on the economics. Both of them are founded on the mood of the country and so forth and so on. But this is where politics, law, economics, all of them mix. And a decision one way or the other could be fair or unfair, depending on who is looking at the picture. So personally, I find that thing wrong. I'll put it as bluntly as that. Except somebody has got evidence to demonstrate that there's more to what we are all saying. If there is, then the people who are making that claim, in law, the burden is on those people who allege those facts that I have not seen yet. So that's my view of this matter, in all fairness.
Let me bring in Kobina. Hold for me, Lawyer Painter. Let me bring in Kobina Atabedu, who is a procurement analyst. And I think I'll put this question to both of you, but I'll start with Kobina. So La Bianca company also feels that the special prosecutor does not even have jurisdiction in this matter. Why? They cite the Customs Act of 2015, Act 891, and what it stipulates, and say that on the back of what processes it stipulates, which allow for them to apply for these reviews and to get them, they feel they have not erred in law. But do you feel that that actually takes away the right of the special prosecutor to pursue such a matter?
Okay, so I started off my submission by stating that I feel sorry for La Bianca because what has happened is actually permitted within the customs framework. So that is the first point I want to make with Mr. Pintel, that we are all on the same page. The difference is that by inference, based on the circumstantial evidence, sometimes you can leave doubts or questions in the minds of people, and that is why they want to probe. And that is what I suspect has happened. As to whether he has jurisdiction or not, he takes his jurisdiction from his law, the OSP Act. If the OSP Act allows him to go anywhere and can be restrained, whether there's an end, if you read the Act, normally at the end of the Act, where they would nullify a previous Act, they will state that this one supersedes the previous one which was there. Or sometimes they'll say that they will run concurrently for a period. So I haven't taken my time to avert myself to the OSP law. Maybe I should. But what I can say is that as long as his law allows him that unfettered access to go into any environment, as long as he is acting on a request or a petition, I doubt if anybody can say they don't have jurisdiction. And if you think that he doesn't have jurisdiction, there's only one place you can go. You go to the Supreme Court and get them to declare that he doesn't have jurisdiction, and it will kill the matter.
Do you feel, Kobina, before I go back to Lawyer Paintel, do you feel that if we're going to be fair, then others too should be affected? Others who may have got similar arrangements, not just the La Bianca company, but others within that same framework should also be investigated?
I'll be honest with you, I have been in that position before, where there was an incident, I conducted the investigation, I found something, and what I saw gave me reason to want to go back 6 months to conduct more investigations. So sometimes it happens. And if La Bianca is the one that has become the, for want of a better word, the sacrificial lamb, the question everybody who is an investigator will ask is, if there is this one transaction that the state lost $1 million, could there be other transactions as well? You know why? If he feels that this is not a one-off situation. And when you listen to all the discussions on radio and everything the importers have said, it tells you that this is a common practice. So the OSP again has the discretion to decide to probe further or to leave it. And I don't see why anyone should have a problem that it's a witch hunt. It's unfortunate that La Bianca has become a sacrificial lamb in this case. But nothing stops the OSP from doing his job if he feels that there's something untoward going on. What we are rather doing is putting pressure on him, taking the wind out of his sail, making him ineffective, and turn around to come and say that the office is a useless office, it should be disbanded.
Hold for me as we get ready to wrap the conversation. Lawyer Paintel, you'll pick those 2 points, and then we'll get to your summary comments, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I've already made a point that a party or anybody is entitled to make a without prejudice payment. But then once you've gone ahead to make that payment, it does not lie in your mouth then to turn back and say that that payment that you made was without basis or the demand on you was without regard to law.
Right.
Because at least, at the very least, you must accept that the person had a right to make the demand. It is only that you do not want to go into the merits or the whatever, the pros and cons. And therefore, you go ahead and make the payment. And that is what exactly they did. And as a matter of fact, in law of God, this principle we call estoppel. Estoppel by conduct. By your own conduct, by your conduct in going ahead to make that payment, you are heard to be saying that the person who made that request on you had a right to make that request. And thereafter, you cannot be heard to say the contrary. So that's the way I'll put it. And even though I say it's without prejudice, that's the way I'll put it.
Implied action.
Come again?
I said implied action.
That is so.
It's
by
a
your own
thought.
conduct.
Yes.
By your own conduct. You cannot then say that the person doesn't have a right. But I've already made the point that, you see, the OSP has so many things to do at the same time, and he has to choose how to use his time and his resources. And what it means is that if there are similar cases that are pending for investigations, there must have been some tip-off for him possibly to have acted in the Bianca in the way that he has done. So if somebody has got concrete evidence of similar things, because see, you cannot invite the OSP on the basis that you believe, on the supposition that there must exist. No, that's not the way we talk in law. If he had all the time, possibly he could do that. But I'm putting it this way, that if other people have got evidence to show or to suggest that similar things have gone on in the past, possibly we have even lost more to other people than even the Bianca, please provide the evidence. And then if he fails to act, we will all say that what happened is a witch hunt. I mean, that's the way, in fairness, we need to be judging our public officers and everything. And then you can ask the question, why did you do this to me? But you failed to act in a similar manner. That's how we hold public officers to accountability. So please, I will put it this way by way of challenge, that for everybody who generally believes that such things have gone on in the past, please, not a belief that we are talking about here. We are talking about the existence of evidence. Because I can assure you that our everything, the public, I mean, I don't know, the public space, if the OSP decides that he wants to go in everywhere, please, don't forget he's got a mandate. Don't forget that he was appointed by a political party or the president to achieve, specific things within a particular time. Please, then he will go haywire. He will completely go out of range, and then will not be able to assess his effectiveness. So let's allow him the space that he has given to himself. And we'll say that for the avoidance of doubt, without anybody providing concrete evidence, let's not say that he failed to investigate everybody. That cannot be a proper charge or allegation against him. That's my view of this matter.
Your summary comments then, the way forward on this matter as well, very briefly, and then I'll wrap up with Kobna.
Yeah, I would think that so far the OSP is acting right, in my honest view. So far, we owe him a duty to furnish him with the evidence, because see, the police and our prosecutor, they keep on making the point. They are nobody without people like us furnishing them with evidence. Ghana is also a country where we consider it an abomination to provide evidence of wrongdoing. And therefore, we sit by and then we keep mute. And then when the canker increases, we pretend like we didn't know, we could not have helped. So my own invitation to everybody is that for those who have evidence, let them furnish it. Even if they want to, tie their hands, cause it to be published. You don't need permission, but please, I'm warning those, if you cause publications to be made and they are found to be untrue, you may be sued for defamation. But if you really have evidence that you think hold water, please, I'm challenging you, I'm inviting you, let it be available wherever and however you can make it available to OSP. Please go ahead and do it. At the end of the day, Ghana will be better off for all of us. Thank you very much.
Mr. Painsil, we're grateful that you took the time to join us. Kweku Painsil is a lawyer. Kobna, you have the final word.
Yes, I think that, listen, this country is down a slippery slope, and we need concerted efforts to salvage it.
Right.
Corruption has become endemic, if not pandemic. And one of the key institutions that can help us halt it and reverse the trend is the OSP. I think, just like we say in our legal jurisprudence, the law lies in the bosom of the judge. In this case, the decision to prosecute or not to prosecute lies with the OSP to make. You can make an allegation, you can send a petition, you can give him whatever tip-off you want. It is up to him to determine whether there's prima facie evidence, and then he can proceed to investigate and proceed to prosecute. When he chooses to do that, we should stop doing that. It is distasteful to see that a group of chiefs would go and campaign against him on the basis that she's from their land. I am from Western Region too, but I'm disappointed because if we do that, we will turn everything into either a political football or an ethnicity football, and this country will be worse off. If she hasn't done anything wrong, the investigation will prove and absolve her. If she has done wrong, it will come out. Why would anyone want to use influence peddling here? What they did amounts to influence peddling.
Kobina, grateful for your time. Kobina Tabedu is a procurement analyst, and we're grateful to all of those who joined the conversation earlier. Vitus Azim, anti-graft campaigner. We just heard from Kobina Atabedu, a procurement analyst, Kweku Paintel, a lawyer, and Mr. Kofiga as well, who joined the conversation. We take a break, and when we return, there's a lot more talk, but don't you forget, we'll definitely bring in some bits from the EcoBank Joy News Habitat Fair. Do stay with us.